Okay, what's up, guys? Today I'm going to share with you books that I've recently read. This is going over the past, since the beginning of the year, basically, since like January. These are all the books that I've finished. This is the most I've read in a long time. I just recently started getting back into reading, so there's a lot of books that I have been meaning to pick up to read. I'm trying my best to get to every single one of these books. Anyways, we're gonna get into the video. The first book that I have to share with you is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. This book I picked up maybe like a year ago and I just never read it. I heard so many good things about it from like BookTube and like other booktubers that I watch, but I just never got a chance to read it. But then I started to follow this book club from this YouTuber that I watch named Megan Hughes, and this was one of the books for one of the months. I think it was the month of December or something, but I finished this in January because I wasn't making time for reading and I was just getting back into reading, so I was not doing like readathons or anything like that, you know, like I was just taking my time with this. So I finished this in January. It was a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it. This book follows the main character. Her name's Star. She's 16 and she goes to a prep school that's like mostly white kids. Like she's like, I think one of 3 black kids like in this school. And so she's constantly switching between her life at this prep school and then her life back home. Along the way, one of her close childhood friends gets murdered by a cop. She was with him at the time, so the story follows along her navigating her life after this incident and her struggle between having those 2 identities and what to do about it, basically. It's a really good book. I really highly recommend it. It just opened my eyes to things that I'm not aware of, being white. And I've never been in a situation like that. This was based off, I believe, the author's experience. I'm not 100% sure. But from what I was hearing, this is based off of a real event that either the author experienced or like someone the author knew like experienced. So it's based in truth, and obviously it does happen. Such a great read. I really enjoyed my time reading this, and I recommend you read it as well. The second book that I finished this year in 2020 was definitely a shorter book because that book was, for one of my first books getting back into reading, was like 400 pages, which was a lot for me, like just dipping my toe back into reading. This book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. This book, first off, gorgeous. I love, these are like my favorite colors, like red, orange, and yellow. Such a gorgeous book, and the pages are, I don't know what it's called, but it's like when you open up an old book and the edge of the pages aren't like smooth, they're like a bit rough. It gives a bit of an antique feel to the book, even though it's not very old. Like I bought it within the past year. The Alchemist is a very well-known story. It's a book that's read in high school. I never got the chance to read it in high school. That's why I decided to pick it up. I really enjoyed my time reading this book. It was very almost like introspective. It made you really think about like one's purpose in life. It talked a lot about having or achieving one's destiny and how everybody has a destiny. A lot of people don't follow the right path. They get distracted along their way and they end up falling off the path leading to their destiny. So it was a wonderful read. I really enjoyed it a lot. It's a quick read too. I believe it's less than 200 pages. It's like 150 pages or something like that. So it's a quick read, and I blew through it in like 2 days max. So I really recommend this one. The next book that I read this year is a book called Educated by Tara Westover. I don't personally have this book with me because when I read it, I just took it out from the library and I've since returned it. This was the February book, I believe, for Megan Hughes book club. So I picked it up. It's a memoir about the main character, Tara. I guess not character, the main person, the main woman, Tara. She comes from a Mormon household and they're also doomsdayers, and her father's so extreme that he didn't even enroll his children in public school. They're homeschooled. Some of them don't even have birth certificates. They were never registered because they were just born at home, not in a hospital, because the father is so extreme that he doesn't believe in hospitals and the whole government and the education system and everything to do with the man. This book was quite an interesting read. I've never read a book about, honestly, about other religions, which is something that I want to get more into because I do enjoy learning about other religions. But anyways, I've never read a book like this before and it was such a fun time reading it. The story follows Tara through her life, obviously, but one of the pivotal moments in her life is when she decides at the age of 17 to go to school, even though her father doesn't agree, because obviously he doesn't believe in the education system. She decides to go to school at the age of 17. She starts college and it just follows her through dealing with her family and coming to terms with her own beliefs separate from her father's. That's a huge thing in the book, along with there's abuse. It's such a profound read. It was so moving seeing Tara going through all of these things and just seeing her thought process. It was quite an emotional read. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I started following Megan's book club, because without that I never would have read some of these books. It was just really interesting seeing her transform into a different person, being educated. She lacked so much life experience because she was just sheltered in her father's home. It was a really interesting read. I really enjoyed the read. Another book that I read that was a tad bit more lighthearted is the book Symptoms of Being Human by Jeff Garvin. The main character's name is Riley. Riley is non-binary, and the story starts off with Riley transferring from a private school to a public school because their father is a congressman and he's trying to pass some bill to assist public schools. I don't know. They don't really talk about it that much. It would look good if your only child, went to a public school and not a private school. But anyways, that's where the story starts off. Riley is starting their first day at a public school and already is riddled with anxiety about life in general, and now they're being thrown into a new school. They're coming to terms with their gender identity. They're nervous about making friends. They have trust issues. Who doesn't? It's just a wonderful read. I love reading YA books like this where the main character is struggling with their sexuality and their identity, because it just gets very introspective, and those are the kind of books that I really love to read. And Riley is really funny. Throughout the book, Riley made me laugh, laugh out loud multiple times, which doesn't normally happen when I'm reading. I'll in my head just be oh, that's funny, but Riley made me literally laugh out loud. So it's a fun book. Highly recommend this book. It was a wonderful read. Also, Riley's a nerd and I love that. Okay, that's all I have to say about this book. The next book I read is another book from Megan Hughes book club. This was the March read, because March was last month. Oh wait, I got all of these wrong. This was the February read. The Tara Westover book, Educated, was the January read. So then The Hate You Give was the December read, and I was just really late on reading that. Okay, now that we've got that timeline situated, this was the February read for Megan Hughes book club. This is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I don't know. This was such a wonderful read. This book follows two families. There's the Richardsons and then the Warrens. The Richardsons are a family living in Shaker Heights, and the whole town is very like prim and proper. They all follow the same rules. They don't really, there's no like outliers. Nobody breaks the mold, if you will, like of this town. Everybody's pretty much along like the same narrow path. Then the Warrens, which is Mia and her daughter, they move into the Richardsons' like summer home or whatever. They start shaking things up because Mia is not your typical mom. She and her daughter don't have the typical mother-daughter relationship. Everything about them just doesn't fit into the prim and proper ways of Shaker Heights, and it bothers Mrs. Richardson, especially after Mia decides to help out one of her coworkers who is a Chinese woman who lost her baby or abandoned her baby one night and tries to fight to get her baby back. All the while, the woman who's trying to adopt said baby is one of Mrs. Richardson's closest friends. So they kind of divide on opposite sides of this war over this baby, basically. And it becomes this huge thing along with all the other subplots in this. Like, there's so much going on in this book, and you get a bunch of different perspectives from the Richardson kids. Like, you get to see their perspective on certain things, as well as like you get to see different family dynamics. It's a fun read. I really enjoyed reading this. I keep saying this about every single book, but I really enjoyed like a lot of the books that I've read this year so far. And this is another really highly recommended one. This was also part of Reese Witherspoon's book club, which is really random. And they also made a Hulu show about this book. But I heard that the show is very different from the book, so I'd recommend reading the book first. It has a lot of like twists and turns. It's a wonderful time. As I just said, I enjoyed a lot of the books that I read this year, but unfortunately the next book I have to share with you is a book that I didn't really enjoy, which made me kind of sad because it was made into a movie and I loved the movie. This book is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. If you've seen the movie, then you know what this is about. This follows Rachel Chu, New Yorker. She is a Chinese woman living in New York, born in New York. So she's Chinese descent, but she's American. At the beginning of this book, she is dating Nicholas Young, who, unbeknownst to her, is like a millionaire back in Singapore. His whole family are millionaires. They're like the richest family in Singapore. Rachel is oblivious to this. Just with that alone, you would think that that would be an interesting book, which I wholeheartedly love the movie. I couldn't get enough of the movie. It was such a fun time. It was full of drama and like conflict. Unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy the book. The main plot of this is that Nick is the best man in his best friend's wedding back in Singapore, and he invites Rachel to come with him, even though Rachel has never met anybody in his family except for like his one cousin Astrid. But she's like the only other cool one that like isn't really judging her. Back in Singapore, everybody there likes to know everybody's drama. They like to be in everybody's business, blah blah blah. Like, that's just like the culture there. Everybody knows everything about everybody. You know? The main plot of this is Rachel being flown to Singapore with Nick and just her struggles getting to know the family and preparing for this wedding and all of that jazz. So it sounds like a fun book, but I just couldn't get myself into this. Each chapter you get a different perspective of the events leading up to the wedding, and I got about 200 pages into the book and we follow Rachel to Singapore. Like, she had just gotten to Singapore by page 200, and I'm like, 200 pages and we're just getting to Singapore where like all the drama is in Singapore. Like, this is going so slow. I tried for like weeks trying to get into this book. It took me like 3 weeks to get to page 200 because it just was not interesting to me. I don't know why. So sad to say, I DNF'd this book. This is my first DNF ever, honestly. I normally will just like push through, but like at the time I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. I don't have the time to be wasting on a book. I DNF'd this book, sadly. I'm not sure if I should try it again. I don't really feel like trying it again because it just wasn't interesting to me. But I digress, okay? I'm sorry. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. I love the movie though. The next book that I have to share with you is the March book club book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I had no idea Hank Green wrote books. I have all of John Green's books, I'm pretty sure, unless he came out with something after Turtles All the Way Down. I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with him. But anyways, Hank Green. Had no idea he wrote books. To the best of my knowledge though, this could possibly be his first book. This was quite an interesting book. Definitely something I wouldn't have picked up all on my own. The story follows this 23-year-old woman, April May, who, after coming home from work at 3 a.m., she's on her way home from work, and she stumbles upon this really gorgeous sculpture in the middle of New York, and she stops. She's like, oh my god, why is nobody why have I not heard anything about this? She's in the art scene. She's a designer or something at her job. She is like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous, blah blah blah. She directs her friend to come out to make a video about it, blah blah blah. Little did she know, this wasn't a sculpture at all. It's actually an alien. I don't want to say an alien life form because I don't think they confirm that it is an alien life form, but it low-key is. I don't know. It's alien nonetheless. The story follows April as she is the first to make contact, and she's the first to do this, to do that, how the plot thickens with this alien. It's such a fun read. I really enjoyed April and her weird comedy and her weird self-deprecating humor. I don't know. It was a fun read, and I really wasn't expecting to enjoy an almost sci-fi book. I enjoyed it, and I heard that Hank Green is coming out with a sequel. Based off the ending of this, I was expecting a sequel. And so I was pleased to hear that he's coming out with a sequel this year in July, I think. So I'll definitely be picking that one up. I got this one from the library, so might have to buy this and the sequel when it comes out. We'll see what happens. If you're a fan of sci-fi books and almost has a bit of thriller to it, not scary thriller, just I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. I wanted to know what was going on. That kind of thriller. So I highly recommend this book. The next book I have to show you, I read this in March, but it's April 3rd when I'm filming this, and I have since found out that this is the April book club book. Poor Megan Hughes book club. So I'm kind of sad that I read it. I'm not sad that I read it, but I'm also sad that I didn't read it along with Megan. Anyways, it's Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secret of the Universe, or The Secrets of the Universe, by Benjamin Elier Sands. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Aristotle and Dante are two 15-year-old high school boys living in El Paso, Texas. And the story just follows their friendship and family dynamics. They're both Mexican descent. It talks about their culture and how they struggle with their culture, and it's just a heartwarming book. It's a fun read. I couldn't put it down. It was one of those books that, even though I was tired of reading a book, the act of reading a book, I couldn't get enough of this book. I just had to keep reading because I needed to know what was happening. So I finished this book in 2 days, which is a rare occurrence for me, but I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was beautifully written. I love the way that the author explores their friendship and just really illustrates how different Aristotle's family is to Dante's family, and it's just a heartwarming, good read. So I highly recommend this. The last book I have to share with you is a book I finished in one day, solely because it is a poetry book. It's one of those books that I know I'm gonna have to reread over and over again, but I did have my first read through of it in one day. It's the book Her by Pierre-Alex Gentil. Her. All the poems in this book are centered around her. A lot of the poems explore self-worth and getting over love or being in love or knowing your worth in a relationship, like all those things. A lot of the poems I had to like bookmark or write down or take a picture of because it just was a beautiful book. It was exactly what I needed when I read it. If you're a fan of poetry, I would recommend this book. I'm not super into poetry, but I'm trying to get myself into poetry. I have several poetry books that I've like been meaning to read. This was the first on my list, so I highly recommend. Okay guys, so these are all of my books that I have read since January 1st of this year. This is honestly a way bigger stack than I was expecting to have. I'm really proud of myself for getting this many books done. So 9 books in total, which is quite the read for me. It's been 3 months out of the year, 3 full months, and I've gotten 9 books. That's a good time. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this related to books or even plants, I do videos about plants in my garden, then subscribe and like this video if you liked it. Leave video suggestions in the comments down below for any other videos you'd like to see me film. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.